Yes, hi. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. It's very nice to be here. I'm going to present, as you said, on two companies, but we'll start with Nerre Therapeutics. So I'm actually thrilled to be able to share this with you. We have something very exciting in orvepitant, which is a first-in-class, non-opioid, once daily effective treatment for chronic refractory cough, and actually has the potential to be a blockbuster therapy. So this is the summary slide. If you choose to leave after this, then you'll have had the whole story in one slide, and then I'll evolve it as we go along. But effectively, orvepitant has just come out of a phase 2b study. Results initially look mixed, but actually the results confirm that orvepitant is statistically significant and has clinically relevant effects in chronic refractory cough. And I'm going to share with you some of the data. We have 900 exposures with orvepitant, which is actually very rare to have a compound at this stage with such a lot of exposures, and I think it gives great confidence in the profile of the asset. The tox pack is almost complete. And actually, just a headline to everyone out there, you need to check your metabolite cover. So that's something that came from left field for us. But obviously, that work's undergoing, and our package is looking very strong and good to go into phase 3. We have a very simple small molecule. So these are a bit unusual these days, but it's a small molecule, simple tablet formulation, and the API is all good to go for the phase 3. We have a very unusual PIP waiver. So the Europeans agreed that chronic cough is not something that young children suffer with. So that makes our development plan a lot simpler. We have a multi-layered IP estate, and we have a granted patent for chronic cough and in many types, and we also have a granted combination patent for combination treatment with IPF compounds. We have just come out of an end of phase 2 with the FDA. I can't share the details of that, but suffice to say the meeting went extremely well, and the FDA are very supportive of this area. And then finally, and I'll touch on this in the presentation, there is great potential not just in chronic refractory cough, which was the initial indication, but in other cough types, and I'll show you some proof of mechanism data with another NK1 receptor antagonist. So all in all, the compound and the space promises to have real blockbuster potential. I'll start by sharing the team. We're really a team of veterans. The founder was Mike Trower there, who was CSO and spun the compounds out of GSK. I joined 4 years ago, actually. It doesn't feel like 4 years, but as CEO. And the rest of the team are very experienced. We've well over a century of experience between us in strategy and operations. So you've got Steve, our CMO, Becky, finance, Joe, CMC, and Liz, a fantastic ClinOps person, but you're not allowed to steal her. And our very strong board of directors and investors. And Ina's here. Ina Prosser, Dr. Prosser from Fountain Health Partners in Dublin, led the Series B a few years ago now. And we have a very strong board. You'll recognise the names Forbion, Advent were the original investors, OrbiMed are involved. And our chairman is Andrew Kay. He's well known in these circles. He was the CEO of Algeta when they were acquired by Bayer, and also he was the chairman of Wilson when they were acquired earlier this year with Alexon. So he's got a lot of experience in the space. So a very strong and committed and collegiate, I would say, team. So let's go back to chronic cough. The reason there's a lot of interest in chronic refractory cough and why Merck have stepped into the space is because this is one of the last unmet needs in respiratory healthcare. If you look on the left, yeah, that's the right, chronic cough is the main reason that people present at primary care physicians in the US. And you can see what do we mean by chronic cough? We actually mean a cough that persists over greater than 8 weeks. And the incidence of that is actually high. It's low double digits, around 12%. But of those people, around 7 will consider that their cough disrupts their daily life and is debilitating cough. And the prevalence of chronic refractory cough is probably in the order of 4 or 5%. So this is a really large space. It's as big as some of the other respiratory conditions, and as yet unsatisfied. It's worth saying that we're just starting to understand about chronic cough, but it's recognised that it is a composite of symptoms. So the so-called cough burden constitutes the frequency of the cough, the intensity of the cough, the patient's perception of the severity of the cough, and also how it affects their daily life. And in our study, we looked at all of these elements. So we measured cough frequency using a VitaloJAK, and that's a standard early research technique, but it's not used at all in the clinic. Worth saying that this approach doesn't measure intensity of cough, just frequency. Severity is measured using a VAS, and the quality of life impact is measured using a well-validated Leicester cough questionnaire. It is very important to say that cough frequency, which everyone holds up as, perhaps a very important element of cough, is not a surrogate for severity. So if I'm a woman and I'm coughing 3 times an hour, which is very low frequency, but every time I do that, I urinate, then that's a very severe cough. Whereas if I'm coughing consistently and I've high frequency, it might not be that severe. So severity and frequency are not the same thing. I'll move on to orvepitant then. There's a lot of preclinical evidence to support NK1 receptor antagonists as potential antitussives, and there's evidence in about 5 animal species. I'm not going to go into that, but just to show you some highlights, it's very important that what you get with an NK1 receptor antagonist is full receptor occupancy. This is required for efficacy. Now, those of you who know the space or in the space will know that there's been other NK1 receptor antagonists that have been tested in cough and failed, and they failed probably because they didn't achieve what orvepitant achieves, which is full receptor occupancy over the 24-hour period. So we have a couple of PET scans here that shows that NK1 receptors are located in the important areas of the brain where cough is controlled, and that we can achieve full receptor blockade of those receptors in the appropriate areas of the brain over a 24-hour period. And that's really critical. So 24-hour efficacy then is attainable with a compound like orvepitant. I'm going to go into the phase 2b design now. So Volcano 2 was what we called our phase 2b study. This is a summary of design. Essentially, it was a standard, well designed and robustly executed phase 2b study looking at 3 different doses and placebo. So it was double-blind, randomized placebo control. We used the British and American Society criteria to define chronic cough. We used a baseline into criteria of 10 coughs per hour. We excluded potentially confounding centrally acting meds. So all of the standard approaches, and this is the design. We got the results earlier this year. We did do a press release, and I'm going to share with you some of the high-level results that have already been published and presented at congresses. So let's start by looking at the patient-reported outcomes. When this study was undergoing, some of the large recruiters said, orvepitant works. Patients are telling us they've never felt so good. And this is the evidence at the end of the study that demonstrates that. So what you see here in the various different questionnaires, the Leicester cough, the cough severity, the urge to cough, you can see, have I got a pointer? Oh, no, gosh, I've switched it off probably. Is there a pointer? No. What you see here is there's a full analysis set of data, and then there's a predefined higher frequency group, because when we started this study, we didn't really know how these populations were going to react. But what you can see here is that on all of the PROs, there is a clinically significant and statistically relevant improvement in how patients report their cough, whether with the Leicester cough questionnaire or the cough severity VAS or the urge to cough. In other words, this confirms that orvepitant, according to patients, works for them in their chronic cough. This is a visual representation of the different scales. So you can see here the Leicester cough. The green is orvepitant 30 milligrams, and you can see a statistically significant improvement over placebo. High is good in this case. When you look at the other side, the urge to cough and the cough severity VAS, you can see again the green versus the purple placebo, statistically significant difference from placebo and clinically relevant. The number of relevance is 1.3 in the Leicester cough, and you can see on the other slide we're achieving well above that at 1.6 and 1.9. The cough frequency data was really interesting. In this study, it actually was the primary endpoint. And, initially you could say the elephant in the room is the primary endpoint failed. Well, actually, the purpose of phase 2B is to understand how best to take the asset forward into phase 3. And what we've done in this study is really learned a lot about cough frequency. So what you can see on the far side is that in the full analysis set, there was no separation of anything. And essentially the reason for that was the lower frequency coughers. So when you separate out the higher and the lower frequency data is really all over the place and it just clouds the picture. But when you look at the higher frequency group, by the way, this wasn't powered to show this, you can see a very clear separation of active, which is green, 30 milligrams from placebo. So you can see in that higher frequency group, we can clearly demonstrate an improvement versus placebo. And this is the population that we would intend to study moving forward and have discussed that with the FDA. And I think we've had a very favourable response to that. Moving on, just then, when you look at responder rates in that higher frequency group, you can see a very clear separation of the 30 milligrams green from the placebo at every level, whether it's those who've achieved a 70% reduction in their cough, a 50% reduction in cough, or 30% reduction in their cough. And you can see those who achieved a response rate of 30%, it was 70% of the responders on the 30 milligrams, and that was statistically significantly different from placebo. So you can see a significant benefit in that population. So what we believe we have shown with Volcano 2 is that not just that orvepitant works, but actually what we've done is also confirm the tolerability profile. So this is just a summary of the safety and tolerability. And as I said, orvepitant has now got 900 exposures. And this study again confirmed that orvepitant has a very benign safety profile. It doesn't have a profile like placebo. And often when you hear that, you wonder whether the drug works. But this is a very benign and very well tolerated profile. I thought before I finished, I would just share with you another piece of data. So we see from our study that orvepitant works in chronic refractory cough. There is a proof of mechanism study conducted in lung cancer patients with aprepitant, which is an NK1 receptor antagonist. And you can see in that population, within 3 days, there is a significant reduction in the treated active group versus placebo. So what this study demonstrates and confirms is that NK1 receptor antagonists and orvepitant have utility not just in chronic refractory cough, but in other cough types. And we intend to continue to look at other cough types in the future. This is an independent analysis, and it basically is estimating the value of this marketplace. And you can see, according to this, they're suggesting that within 5 years of launch, orvepitant and gefapixant, which is the Merck compound, has the potential to have blockbuster status. And you can clearly see here that orvepitant is the closest competitor to gefapixant, the Merck drug, which is in phase 3. I haven't mentioned that, but it is in phase 3. It's a highly effective drug. Unfortunately, it's associated with taste dysfunction, which orvepitant isn't. So you can see that orvepitant will compete very well with gefapixant and is the closest competitor. So then, just to finish, I think I'm bang on my 2 minutes. In summary, Volcano 2 has confirmed the efficacy of orvepitant in chronic cough. We've got great exposure in 900 patients, well tolerated. The compound is ready from a CMC and a tox perspective, well supported by patent protection. And, we've had a good discussion with the regulators and clear insight in how to move this compound into the next stage of development. And we have 1 minute, 30 seconds left for questions.